Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick. So this is part 2 of my Rhino Rocktober 2024 video. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, go back and watch that one first and then come back and see this one. There's a bunch of links down below. You got links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that I put together every week, and the Patreon page. So make sure you check all that out. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time I release new episodes. So there's a ton of great albums coming out over the month of October. That's part of the Rhino Rocktober series that they do every year. Some really cool stuff. There's 40 albums total, so I had to break it up into 2 videos. I did 20 in the first half, and I got 20 more albums in this half. The first 2 albums are ones that I'm kind of on the fence about. I already have them on vinyl, so I don't really know if I want to grab these Rhino Rocktober versions, which I'm a sucker for colored vinyl, so I might grab them anyway. But the first one is Stone Temple Pilots, number 4. Came out back in 1999. It was their 4th studio album. It's going to be on black and white splatter vinyl. It's going to run you about $25. It's a 25th anniversary release. This is a hugely underrated album. I think it really gets overshadowed by really how great the first 3 Stone Temple Pilots albums are. I would say I would put this album up there with Core and with Purple as the best stuff that SDP ever released. And then you've also got Shangri-La-Di-Da coming out, released back in 2001. It was their 5th studio album. It's going to be on neon yellow with orange splatter vinyl. Also going to run you about $25. So this is more of a musically diverse album. And I think they really kind of experimented a little bit more on this one. Commercially it didn't do as well as their first 4 albums did, but still sold pretty well. It hit, I think it was number 9 or number 10 on the Billboard 200. The next album is one I feel like I think this was part of the Rocktober series either last year or the year before. It's a great album. I don't have a copy of it on vinyl. I do need to grab a copy in October when this comes out. But this is the Stooges' self-titled debut album. Came out back in 1969. It's going to be on ruby red vinyl. It's going to run you about $25. This is remixed by John Cale. A hugely influential album. This is the album that really kind of laid the groundwork in the late 60s for punk music and the whole punk revolution that would happen in the 70s. It's a great album. If you haven't listened to that before, definitely check that one out. And then Third Eye Blind Blue is also getting released. Came out back in 1999. It was their 2nd studio album. It's going to be on clear with blue splatter vinyl. 2 LP release. It's going to run you about $34. This is the follow-up to their hugely, gigantically successful self-titled album, which I love the first album. I don't think I ever listened to Blue, though. By the time this album came out, I was very much into punk and ska in the later part of the 90s, so I don't think I ever really listened to it. I think there's 1 or 2 singles maybe off this album that I've heard, so it's definitely one I need to go back and stream. Another album is getting released on October 4th. I feel like it's been pressed to death over the last couple of years, but this is Stay Hungry by Twisted Sister. Came out back in 1984. It was their 3rd studio album. It's going to be on translucent red vinyl. 2 LP release, going to run you about $35. This is the 40th anniversary pressing that's coming out for October. Has a 2nd LP with a live show. It's I believe this is unreleased concert. Yeah, it's an unreleased concert from May of 1984 in California. It was a hugely iconic album. Really kind of made it was the album that made Twisted Sister a household name. I don't have a copy of it on vinyl. I probably should grab a copy of it for October. And then you got Typo Negative, Slow, Deep, and Hard coming out also. Released back in 1991. It was their debut studio album. Another 2 LP release. It's going to be on green and black marble vinyl. It's going to run you about $35. So when this album was first released, it was released before the band was even known as Typo Negative. I think they were called Repulsion was the name of the band. And the keyboardist for the band was actually the one that borrowed a bunch of money, $5 or $6 grand from his family to get this album released. It was one, it definitely kickstarted the whole band's career, the band's whole career. Really kind of helped define that early 90s really darker, heavier genre of music. And it's one we're checking out. I'm not the biggest Typo Negative fan, but if you're a fan of that darker, heavier sound, I think it's one we're checking out. There's also another Typo Negative album coming out on October 4th. This is October Rust. Came out back in 1996. It was their 4th studio album. Two LP release is also going to be on green and black marble vinyl. It's going to run you about $35. This is their biggest, most successful album. Hit number 42 on the Billboard 200, which is, it doesn't sound like a lot, but, it's really big for a metal album. This is the album that I first started listening to Typo Negative on. Like I said, I've never been a huge fan, but this is the album that kind of pulled me in, made me listen to some of their other stuff. But, I do listen to this one every now and again, but it's an album I'm not going to drop $35 on. I'm okay just streaming that one. And then you've also got the debut album from David Coverdale coming out, White Snake, which I didn't realize was that's where he got the name of the band from. Came out back in 1977. Like I said, it was his debut album. It's going to be on translucent tan vinyl. It's going to run you about $25. So he did this, he recorded this album. He wrote and recorded this album really in the aftermath of the total collapse of Deep Purple. And, I think everything that was going on in his music life, I think really impacted the quality of this album. It came out with a bunch of really mixed reviews, and it didn't perform as well as they really thought it was going to do in the mainstream. But I think, like, looking back on this album in retrospect, I think it's a better album than people give it credit for. But like I said, if you know David Coverdale, you know White Snake, if you know some of his stuff from Deep Purple, this is definitely one that's worth kind of going back and checking out, I think. There's another David Coverdale album coming out on October 4th. This is North Winds, released back in 78. It was his second studio album. It's going to have black ice vinyl. It's going to run you $25. It's also newly remastered. So this is the album where I think he was really kind of able to kind of separate himself from everything that happened with Deep Purple and sit down and just create a good album. This is kind of a back to basics, like blues, rock, R&B rock kind of album. I think this is the album where I think his first album could have been, had it not been for everything kind of going on behind the scenes. And then you also got Wilco, Summer Teeth coming out, released back in 1999. It was their third studio album. It's going to be on electric blue vinyl. 2 LP release is going to run you about $35. So I know the album that came out before this, it sold really well. It charted pretty well. I think this is the album that really kind of broke them into the mainstream, though. Met with wide acclaim. Everyone loved this album. I know that listened to it. I had a friend I worked with at the time that kind of introduced me to Wilco through this album. So, like I said, if you're unfamiliar with Wilco, I think this is a good album to start with. And then we finally made it to the last album that's being released on October 4th. This is Ronnie Wood, I've Got My Own Album to Do. Released back in 74. It was his debut solo studio album. It's going to be on olive green vinyl. It's going to run you about $25, 50th anniversary release. Of course, Ronnie is known as one of the guitarists of the Rolling Stones, and he's got pretty much most of the Rolling Stones on this album, because Keith Richards is on here, Mick Jagger's on here, he's got Mick Taylor's on here also, George Harrison, David Bowie, Rod Stewart, among a bunch of other great ones on there. I've never listened to this album. I'm a big Rolling Stones fan. I've become more of a Rolling Stones fan, I'd say, over the last probably 10 years. So it's definitely one I needed to check out. And then skipping ahead 1 week to Friday, October 11th, you got the Ramones' Pleasant Dreams coming out. Released back in 1981, it was their 6th studio album. It's going to run you about $25. This is the band's first album with all original material. This is an album I kind of slept on for a really long time. I was, growing up, I mainly listened to just the stuff the band did in the 70s. And then, over the years, I finally started listening to more of their 80s stuff. I love this album. This is one of my favorite albums from the band. I know the band wasn't really thrilled with the mix of this album, but, it's got some of my favorite tracks from the band on there. The KKK Took My Baby Away is one of my top 10 tracks from the band. So it's, I've already got 2 copies of it, so I can probably skip on this one. But if you don't have a copy of it, it's a great album to grab. And then there's only one other album coming out on October 11th. That's another Ramones album. This is Animal Boy, released back in 1986. It was their 9th studio album. It's going to run you about $25. Quite possibly, this might be the band's most underrated album. I love this album, and I think that, I don't think enough people really talk about this one. It's a little bit different of an album, though. There's a lot of, inner turmoil going on in the band around this time. I don't think it came through or really impacted the music, though. I know Dee Dee sang a lot more on this album than he did in albums before, but like I said, if you're a Ramones fan and you haven't listened to this one in a while, it's definitely worth checking out. I'll say I don't think I really listened to this album until the Ramones box set came out for Record Store Day a couple years ago. I think that was really the first time I sat down and really listen to this track more than just a couple of songs on there. So it's, like I said, it's definitely one worth checking out. So we're just gonna skip ahead 1 week to October 18th. The first one I'm gonna talk about, you got Velvet Underground, Loaded, coming out. Released back in 1970. It was their 4th studio album. It's another one that's on the ultra clear vinyl. It's It's going to run you about 25 bucks. So this is the band's last album with Lou Reed. I'm not the biggest Velvet Underground fan. I would much, this is probably my favorite album from the band. I guess I should say that. And it's one that I'm interested to check this one out because this is not the standard version of Loaded. This is another one of those alternate versions albums. So you got early versions on here, you got demos or alternate mixes. It's got some great tracks on there. It might be a cool one to check out. And then the last 6 albums I've got, these all come out a week later on October 25th. The first one is The Cars Door to Door, released in 87. It was their 6th studio album. It's going to be on translucent grape vinyl, because it can't just be purple. It's got to be grape. I'm sure there's some kind of difference between the two. It's going to run you about 25 bucks. Of course, it's the band's last album with the full original lineup. The first 5 albums were all huge. They all went platinum here in the U.S. This one didn't do quite as well commercially. It's still a pretty good album, but it was only a gold album here in the U.S. I shouldn't say only. I mean, it's still an achievement to have a gold album. So this is an album that, I haven't listened to in probably, it's got to be probably almost 30 years since I've listened to this one. So it's definitely one I need to go back through and check out. And then you got Foghat Live coming out, released in 1977. It's going to be on translucent orange vinyl. It's going to run you about 25 bucks. So this is a live album recorded in, I think it was May. Yeah, it was May of 77 at the Dome Arena in New York. This is the band's biggest selling album. It has all of their most famous song on it. I should say that. They've got more than just Slow Ride. They've got I Just Want to Make Love to You was also a really good track. I shouldn't crack on them too much for that. Foghat's one of those bands where I'm probably good with just an album like this, so I might grab this one on October 25th. There's also another Foreigner album coming out for October. You've got Head Games that comes out on October 4th. Then you're getting Double Vision on the 25th. Came out back in 78. It was their 2nd studio album. There's another one that's going to be on translucent grape vinyl. It's going to run you about 25 bucks. So this is the follow-up album to their very successful self-titled debut album. But this one was huge. This album blew them into the stratosphere, made them one of the biggest bands in the world there for a while. It went 7 times platinum here in the U.S. Of course, Hot Blooded, Double Vision are 2 classic tracks that are probably still played on some classic rock station pretty much every minute of every day here in the U.S. And then you got Iron Butterfly, Fillmore East 1968 coming out. This was released back in 2011. It's going to run you about 25 bucks. This is the first time it's ever been available on vinyl. This was recorded on April 26th and 27th, 1968, Fillmore East in New York. This is, when I think of Iron Butterfly, this is the period of the band I think of. Like right after In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida came out, the really like the psychedelic craze was going on. This is like the band at their absolute peak. And then the last 2 tracks rounding out the month of October and ending the Rocktober list are 2 new releases. The first one is Porno for Pyros, Pyrotechnics. This is a new greatest hits compilation. It's going to be on clear with orange splatter vinyl. It's going to run you about 25 bucks. Of course, Porno for Pyros was kind of born out of the ashes of Jane's Addiction by Perry Farrell. And it's, they released a couple of really good and really underrated albums in the early to middle part of the 90s. They're one of those bands I'm good with, just a greatest hits compilation though. So, this one I've got on my maybe list. There's 9 tracks on here, and then there's 1 remix track on there. So I might grab that one. And then the last one on the list is Yes Singles 2. This is going to run you about 25 bucks. This is a compilation of singles. Part 1 was a Rocktober release last year. This one's going to be on blue and white splatter vinyl. I'm not the biggest Yes fan. I guess I'll wait to see some reviews. I've kind of slowly started getting into some more progressive rock lately. At least I've been streaming some stuff, so I definitely need to check this one out when it gets released. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Hopefully I didn't go through those too fast. There's 40 titles. I didn't want these videos to be super, super long, so I kind of went through some of those kind of fast. I'm really looking forward to some of these releases. Like I said, there's a couple in the first half that I'm looking forward to. I'm probably going to grab that Stooges release. There's a couple other ones I've got on my maybe list, but let me know what you guys are looking to grab. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all I got. Until next time, keep on spinning. Peace.